saw seconds ticking away from the clock and cannot really spot the difference. And soon I saw minutes ticking away and cannot really see the purpose. Putting it bluntly, the funeral was just a sit before the coffin. Later, I had to find something interesting enough to keep myself awake. See that? I never knew the stomach of an old woman could be so bulged. The day after, my routine life returns. Mary never talks about that night. A moment later, she asked me if I loved her. I suppose I didn't, but I figured this sort of question had no meaning, really. Raymond had sworn to himself that he would make her feel repent of what she had done. He then asked for my advice, and I had no reason to turn him down. I told him to spit in her face and make a fool out of her, but he wanted to give her a beating until she rashes around in pain. He then called us pals for life, but I suppose I didn't mind being with him. Eventually, trouble came. Later, we'd been shadowed all day by some suspicious figures. One of them's the brother of that girl he had the role with, Raymond told me. As a habit, I smoked a cigarette before getting off bed. For 8 years, Salamano and his ugly spaniel had been inseparable. Perhaps through living in one room for years, he has come to resemble it. The old fellow takes him for a walk twice a day, at 11 and 6. Just about 1 week later, I saw Salamano on his doorstep. The old chap wasn't with his dog. Looking in all directions, he muttered and growled to himself. He then grunted, scowled at me, and flew into a rage. His dog was gone. Raymond then told him to check out the pound at the local police station, where his dog could have ended up. That evening, I sat by the window and had another cigarette, as usual. Through the wall came into my room a little wheezing sound. Salamano was weeping. For some reason, I began thinking of Mother. Raymond and I had gone on a vacation in favor of spending the day off. The strong glare of the blazing sun hit me in the eyes like a clenched fist. The Arab who kept following seemed to have a grudge against Raymond. Everywhere they'd follow us and gazed at us silently, as if they were lots of trees or bricks of stone. It was the same heat on the day of Mother's funeral. I had told Raymond that one of them had got a knife, but I spoke too late. The man had already slit his arm, and a part of his mouth as well. On sand's hottest fire, blood dripped out from his wound. With the sun beating on us, we swung around and made our retreat. The cuts on Raymond weren't very deep, and had been stabilized quickly. Raymond and I returned to the beach, with a revolver in his pocket. It was like a furnace outside, but Raymond knew clearly what he was going. We then found the two Arabs again, lying on the sand near a small stream. Raymond reached for his revolver pocket, but the Arabs had yet to make a move. The man who slashed Raymond glared in silence. We stared at one another before Raymond asked if he should plug him one. I told Raymond to give me his revolver, and I would shoot if any of them starts trouble. The sun glinted on Raymond's revolver as it handed it to me, and the whole world seems to have come to a halt on this little strip of sand. The waves carried dazzling sheens of light, and I gritted as hard as I can to fend off the sun. Each time my forehead was pounded by a heat blast, my jaw set hard. Through a shaft of gleaming light shot from steel, I'd seen someone holding a knife. I'd gripped the revolver in my pocket as hard as I could. At all the same moment, sweat had covered my eyes, and I was only conscious of shimmering blades of light scarring my eyelids and stabbing into my eyeballs. Everything began to crack before my eyes. A fiery flame came from the muzzle of the revolver, and out comes a malignant and fatal piece of lead. I fired 4 more shots into the inner body, and each successive shot was another loud, faithful rap on the door of my undoing. They could not make differences to my fate, as fate is already bound to choose me. They couldn't make differences to his fate, as fate is already bound to choose him. question multiple times. At first, I didn't take Laura quite seriously. Blades of light cut through the window blinds, and a single dim lamp stood on his desk. I'd read similar scenes in books, and at first, it all seemed like a game to me. In the prison, the hours seemed to pass by endlessly, just like on the day of Mother's funeral. The prison chaplain has tried to seek my soul from time to time, but I had nothing to say to him. He walked in unannounced and had asked me if I really thought that when one dies, nothing remains. I said yes. Then he sat down in distress. His view meant justice was just a vain thing. Only God's justice mattered. But only the former had condemned me. I yelled at the top of my voice and started howling insults at him. He released himself from my grip, and I could see tears in his eyes. The other day I was brought back to court again. For endless days and hours they had been discussing my soul, but they spoke about my conduct towards Mother at a much greater length than my crime. First, Mother's former friend, Thomas Paris, was called. The judge questioned him about events on the day of Mother's funeral. He said he didn't see me shed a tear. It was Mary's turn next. They asked her about her liaison with me. She told them about the next day of Mother's death. By the time she had finished, the courtroom was so still, you could hear a pin drop. No one quite seemed to pay attention to Salamano, the next witness called. He was a decent chap, he kept repeating. You've got to understand. But no one seemed to be. He was told to stand down. Raymond was the next, and the last witness. He gave me a little wave and led off by saying I was innocent. He kept calling me his pal for life, but not a word about the Arabians were mentioned. Soon he stood down, not sooner than my lawyer did. There was nothing human about me, he said. He then asked me if I felt regret for what I've done. What I felt was less regret than a kind of annoyance. I sat down on my bed and began doing something I haven't done for quite some time. I began to think of Mary. She hadn't written to me for ages. Probably she had grown tired of being a spouse of someone who's been sentenced to death. Or she may be ill or dead. But what did it matter if at this very moment Mary was kissing a new boyfriend? At some point I had imagined if I did not pull the trigger, would I be happier in life? All alike are condemned to die one day. Your turn, too, will come like the others. And what difference to one's value of life does it make if, after being charged with murder, he was executed because he didn't weep at his mother's funeral? I'm supposed to be painful in prison, but I'm not. Have you ever heard of the story of Sisyphus? As a punishment by the gods, Sisyphus was ordered to roll a huge boulder up a steep hill. However, the boulder would then roll back down, symbolizing an eternity of useless effort and unending frustration of Sisyphus. Although resistance was futile against the gods, Sisyphus denied the punishment but enjoyed the painful process. He then felt delighted. Every human being is Sisyphus, but not the same for all. I couldn't choose my fate, but I could choose my way to perceive it, to enjoy the painful process. Some didn't choose to, and how about you?